Flanked by Tiberius's companions, Nerva, Lamia, and Thrasyllus, Gaius Asinius Gallus sat across from the emperor in the formal triclinium of the Villa Jovis. Though their history was long and fraught, their relationship had settled into something like mutual tolerance, civil, if never warm. For it had been Gallus who married Vipsania, the woman Tiberius had been compelled to divorce in order to marry Augustus's daughter. And when Tiberius was exiled to the island of Rhodes, it was Gallus who had become Castor's father. Yet despite everything, Tiberius could not deny that Gallus, motivated by self-interest, had always been supportive of him and of Castor. Gallus had fathered 10 children with the woman Tiberius had loved and lost, 10 half-siblings who would have prospered under the principate of their brother, Tiberius's only son. But that future had ended with Castor's sudden death. Now, the best hope for Gallus's children lay with their cousins, Nero and Drusus Caesar, who, like Gallus's own children, were grandchildren of Marcus Agrippa. And there was nothing wrong with that. Tiberius had dedicated the sons of Agrippina to the Senate. It was only natural that their extended family would rally around them. But that was not what happened. From Sejanus in Rome, Tiberius had received incontrovertible proof that a conspiracy had developed, hatched by none other than Asinius Gallus, in tandem with Titus Sabinus and a few other senators. Agrippina was to be liberated from Herculaneum and delivered to the might of the Rhine legions, where she and her sons would become a true threat to Rome. And though he was not initially implicated in the conspiracy, further proof soon arrived from Sejanus, this time naming Nero Caesar himself. When Tiberius wrote to the Senate calling for the arrest of both Agrippina and her son, Asinius Gallus left Rome at once. The last place Tiberius expected to see him, his name now among the list of conspirators, was Capri. "There is no plot against you, Tiberius," Gallus assured him as they dined on delicacies. "But there is growing concern over what's happening in Rome, especially since you left." Tiberius listened as Gallus gave voice to what many in Rome now saw as the open persecution of the descendants of Marcus Vipsanius Agrippa, the man who had been Castor's grandfather. But it was not Tiberius they blamed. It was Lucius Aelius Sejanus, the man who, in their eyes, sought to become the new Agrippa. Claudia Pulchra, a granddaughter of Agrippa, was the first to die, taking her own life after being accused of adultery. "The penalty for adultery is clearly stated in the laws of Augustus," replied Tiberius. "Claudia could have borne her exile. She chose that path." "Agreed," said Gallus, "which is why her death prompted no immediate alarm. But then Domitius Afer, the same prosecutor who tried Claudia, charged her son Varus with treason as well. And though Domitius Afer, a known supporter of Sejanus, failed to secure a conviction, Varus died nonetheless. Then Rome watched as Agrippina, daughter of Agrippa, was marched out of the city, followed, not long after, by your own departure," Gallus went on. "But after the passing of the Augusta, the persecution of the Agrippans only deepened. Julilla, Agrippina's elder sister, was the next daughter of Agrippa to die in exile, followed soon after by your letter to the Senate, calling for the arrest of Agrippina and her son." Gallus paused, letting the weight of his words settle before pressing on. "There are those in Rome who fear that here on Capri you are no longer free, but held hostage by Sejanus, who has gained more than anyone from your absence. He informs us in the Senate of your words, as he informs you of ours. But is his word trustworthy? Can you be certain the things Sejanus has told you about Agrippina, about myself, Nero, and Drusus, were the truth? Having listened in silence, Tiberius chewed, swallowed, and finally spoke. "Tell me, Gallus," he began slowly, "who was it that proposed Sejanus's birthday be honored as a national holiday?" "I seem to recall," Tiberius went on, voice low and steady, "that your name appeared on that senatorial decree, did it not?" Gallus nodded. "My children are all grandchildren of Agrippa," he said evenly, "and they are all in danger." With that, Tiberius nodded, then glanced at the far end of the triclinium. Several Praetorian soldiers came through the entryway, stopping at Tiberius's table. "They arrived on Capri just before you," Tiberius said, "with a warrant for your arrest. But I wished to hear what you had to say first." When Tiberius nodded to one of the Praetorians, he produced a scroll and read aloud. "For attempting to sow discord between the emperor and the commander of the Praetorian Guard, Gaius Asinius Gallus is to be arrested and named an enemy of the state." Tiberius slumped on the balcony as the sun set over the water. It would never end, he thought. He would never escape the Principate. He had already tried, twice. First, when Augustus died, Tiberius had offered to share the burden, divide the workload, as it had been in the days of the Republic. But the senators had scoffed. And ironically, it had been Gallus himself who had exposed the absurdity of the gesture, asking which part of the empire Tiberius would take for himself. Years later, after the deaths of Germanicus and Castor, Tiberius had tried again. He dedicated Nero and Drusus Caesar to the Senate of Rome, and then he withdrew to Capri. Let the Senate raise the heir. Let them shape a successor in the manner that pleased them. But even then, the factions only deepened. The Senate did not lead, they schemed. They did not unify behind the sons of Germanicus. They divided them, half behind Nero, half behind Drusus. And now another faction had begun to stir, one that refused to follow Sejanus. But how strong was that resistance? It could not have come from the equestrians, many of whom owed their rise to the patronage of Sejanus. But what of the nobility? If Tiberius were to name Sejanus protector of Caligula and Gemellus, the last two boys in the imperial line, would the nobility follow? Tiberius's companion and legal adviser, Marcus Cocceius Nerva, noble by birth and seasoned by law, believed they would not. Why should the families who could trace their ancient lineages to the city's founding submit to a common soldier whose authority came not from birth or legal adoption, but from shadows and spies? Germanicus, Castor, Agrippina, Nero, and Drusus Caesar, each had fallen. Rome was becoming a police state. How long would Caligula and Gemellus survive if Sejanus were named their guardian? The nobility, who had loved and revered Marcus Agrippa, the soldier who had earned his marriage into the house of Caesar, felt very differently about Sejanus. Agrippa had been the reason Augustus became emperor, the man who had fought beside him from the very beginning. But if Tiberius allowed someone like Sejanus to simply rise to the top, a man without pedigree, without ancestry, without name, and then let him marry into the imperial family at the highest level, the nobility would not merely revolt. They would lose any reason to support the Principate at all. Why should the nobility hail a man like Sejanus over one of their own? To appoint such an outsider as guardian of Caligula and Gemellus would not preserve peace. It would provoke the very civil war Tiberius had so reluctantly given his life to prevent. And if civil war came all the same, then everything he had endured, every sacrifice, would have been for nothing. Tiberius, himself from one of the 5 families of Rome, knew Nerva was right. The nobility would never follow Sejanus. When Marcus Agrippa, then Tiberius's father-in-law, had reached a level of power equal to Augustus's, it had been Gaius Maecenas who advised Augustus, "You have raised him so high that you must either kill him or make him your son-in-law." Now, Tiberius found himself in the same position. When Tiberius had needed to bring Germanicus to Rome without arousing the suspicion and anger of his Rhine legions, he ordered him a triumph. What legion would begrudge their beloved general his moment of glory? Now he followed the same pattern. For exposing the conspiracy of Agrippina and her sons to suborn the Rhine legions, Tiberius wrote to the Senate he would assume the consulship in the coming year and share it with Sejanus. While Rome was abuzz, distracted with the distinctive mark of honor given to Sejanus, Tiberius turned his attention eastward. Syria, his final fallback, was still under the authority of Lamia, his companion on Capri. But unrest was growing. Pontius Pilatus, an equestrian appointed by Sejanus, had sparked outrage in Jerusalem by smuggling Roman banners and an image of Tiberius into the city under cover of darkness. The act was an affront not only to the Jewish people, but to Tiberius himself, who had long rejected divine honors and respected the autonomy of local cults. Then, in order to pay for the construction of new aqueducts, Pilatus plundered the temple treasury. The backlash was immediate and violent. Furious at the growing instability of the province to which he might one day have to flee, Tiberius issued a warning in the harshest possible terms: "Keep the peace, or be held accountable." But what had Pilatus hoped to gain from such a brazen offence, carried out in secret as though anticipating condemnation? Perhaps this too was a move by Sejanus. If chaos spread throughout Judea, part of the province of Syria, Tiberius might feel compelled to replace Lamia, opening the governorship to someone Sejanus could control. But Tiberius would not replace Lamia. Where else could he go in the event of a coup? Would the Rhine legions protect him when half of them believed he had been complicit in the death of Germanicus? No. With Claudian influence strongest in the east, Syria remained his last safe option. With Pilatus properly chastised, Tiberius turned his thoughts back to the last boys of the imperial family: Caligula, son of Agrippina, and Gemellus, son of Castor. Nerva's concerns still lingered. If Sejanus could not be trusted, what was to become of the boys if they remained in Rome?